The woman who stepped off that train wasn't the quiet widow Caleb Vance expected. She was armed, dangerous, and running from a past that would follow her straight to his door. What started as a marriage of convenience became a fight for survival when her old life came hunting. This is the story of two broken people who found something worth protecting in each other. But first, they'd have to survive the reckoning. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The train station at Copper Falls had seen better days, much like everything else in this corner of Wyoming territory. The platform sagged in the middle, worn smooth by years of boots and disappointment. Paint peeled from the station house in long curls, revealing older paint beneath, layers of optimism stripped away by wind and time. Caleb Vance stood at the edge of that platform, hat pulled low against the afternoon sun, jaw tight with something between hope and resignation. His hands, calloused, scarred from ranch work, gripped a handwritten letter so worn the creases had begun to tear. He'd read it maybe 50 times in the 3 weeks since he'd sent his advertisement east. Widower rancher seeks practical woman for marriage and partnership. Must be willing to work. Romance not required. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't even particularly honest. He wasn't a widower, just alone. But desperation had a way of simplifying a man's standards. The train announced itself with a shriek of metal and steam, black smoke billowing against the cloudless sky. Caleb's chest tightened. Somewhere on that train was a woman who'd answered his desperate plea, someone willing to tie herself to a failing ranch and a man she'd never met. He expected someone worn down by life, grateful for any offer. Someone quiet. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about why a 32-year-old man with his own land couldn't find a wife the normal way. The train shuddered to a halt, steam hissing like a tired animal. Passengers began to disembark. A merchant with 3 heavy cases, a family with too many children, a circuit preacher clutching his Bible like a shield. Then she stepped down. Caleb's breath caught. She wasn't what he expected, not even close. She wore black, not mourning clothes exactly, but something darker, more deliberate. Her dress was simpler than current fashion, practical in a way that spoke of function over propriety. No bustle, no excessive trim. But it was her bearing that stopped him cold. She moved with precision, each step measured, her eyes scanning the platform with an intensity that made his instincts scream warning. She was maybe 28, with dark hair pulled back in a way that emphasized sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. But it was her eyes that truly unsettled him, gray as winter sky, assessing everything with the kind of attention men learned in war. And there, barely visible beneath the hem of her skirt as she descended, the outline of a gun strapped to her thigh. Caleb's hand instinctively moved toward his own weapon before he caught himself. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Those eyes missed nothing. She approached him directly. No hesitation, no typical female uncertainty. "Caleb Vance?" Her voice was lower than he expected, with an edge that suggested she didn't waste words. "That's me." He tried to keep his voice steady. "You'd be Rhea Vale." She didn't offer her hand. "I answered your letter." Vale. The letter had been signed R. Caldwell, widow of Thomas Caldwell, killed in a mining accident outside Denver. At least, that's what she'd written. "Your letter said Caldwell. I go by my maiden name now." She met his eyes without flinching. "Problem?" Around them, the platform had gone quiet. Caleb noticed old Marcus Webb staring from the general store entrance. Sarah Chen had stopped sweeping outside her boarding house. Even the station master had paused his work, watching this exchange with the kind of attention reserved for rattlesnakes and storm clouds. "No problem," Caleb said, though his gut told him otherwise. "You have bags?" "One." She gestured to a single worn trunk being unloaded from the baggage car. Everything she owned, apparently, fit in one trunk. Caleb moved to retrieve it, surprised by its weight. Books, maybe, or something heavier. When he turned back, he found her studying him with the same clinical assessment she'd given the platform. Taking his measure, he wondered what she saw. A tall man running to lean, sun-weathered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that had stopped expecting good news sometime around his 20th birthday. "My wagon's this way." He hefted the trunk onto his shoulder. She followed without comment, her hand resting casually near her hip, near that hidden gun. The walk through town felt longer than usual. Every eye followed them. Caleb heard Mrs. Patterson gasp from her porch. Tom Wilson actually crossed the street to avoid them, tipping his hat but saying nothing. "Friendly place?" Rhea observed, her tone suggesting she'd seen worse. "Usually is." Caleb loaded her trunk into the wagon bed. "You're not what they expected." "What did they expect?" "Someone softer." "Then they'll be disappointed." She climbed onto the wagon seat without assistance, settling herself with the same economical grace she'd shown on the platform. Caleb swung up beside her, taking the reins. The horses, old mare and older gelding, shifted restlessly, picking up on tensions their master couldn't quite name. They rode in silence through Copper Falls Main Street, such as it was. Past Henderson's General Store, where supplies cost too much and credit ran out too fast. Past the Silver Dollar Saloon, where ranch hands drank away wages they could barely afford to earn. Past Doc Morrison's office, the church with its cracked bell, the blacksmith shop that only opened 3 days a week now, a dying town serving dying ranches in dying territory. Rhea took it all in without comment. If the poverty and decay bothered her, she didn't show it. At the edge of town, where the last buildings gave way to open range, Caleb finally broke the silence. "I should be straight with you." "I'd appreciate that." "The ranch isn't much, 160 acres, but only about 40 of it's good grazing. House needs work. Got maybe 30 head of cattle left, down from 203 years back. Haven't been able to afford hands since spring." He kept his eyes on the road. "I advertised for a wife because I needed help more than I needed romance. Figured I should say that clear. I read your letter, Mr. Vance. I knew what I was accepting. But call me Caleb. When we're married, perhaps." There was something final in her tone that made him glance over. She stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap with perfect composure. But he noticed how her right hand stayed loose, ready to move. "The letter mentioned you were widowed," he said carefully. "I was." "Mining accident, you wrote." "That's correct." "In Denver?" "Yes." It was like pulling teeth, each answer precise but minimal, offering nothing extra. After a few more miles of silence, Caleb tried again. "How long were you married?" 2 years? "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the grasslands in shades of amber and rust. In better times, Caleb had loved this time of day, the way the light softened everything, made even the hardscrabble ranch land look almost beautiful. Now it just reminded him of time passing, of opportunities slipping away with each sunset. "Why Wyoming?" he asked finally. "Woman with your capabilities could probably find work anywhere." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and for just a moment he saw something beneath that controlled surface. Not fear exactly, but something that had lived close to fear for too long. "I needed distance," she said simply. From what, she didn't say. Caleb decided not to press. The ranch came into view as they crested the last rise. A cluster of buildings huddled against the vast emptiness like a child's toys abandoned in a field. The main house, 2 stories of weathered wood that had once been painted white. The barn, listing slightly to the east, its roof patched with mismatched boards. A chicken coop, mostly empty. Corrals that held more dust than livestock. Rhea surveyed it all with the same impassive expression she'd worn since stepping off the train. "It's not much," Caleb said again, hating the defensive note in his voice. "It's more than I had yesterday." He wasn't sure if that was optimism or just brutal practicality. They stopped in front of the house. Caleb set the brake and climbed down, then reached up to help her. She ignored his offered hand, dropping to the ground with easy athleticism. Up close, he realized she was taller than he'd first thought, maybe 5'8". Her eyes were level with his chin. "I'll show you around," he said. "Kitchen's basic but functional. Bedroom upstairs for you. I've been sleeping in the—" "We should talk terms first." Caleb blinked. "Terms?" "Your letter proposed marriage. I accepted. But we should be clear about expectations before anything is formalized." She said it like a business negotiation, which he supposed it was. "All right." He leaned against the wagon, studying her. "What do you want to know?" "What exactly do you expect from a wife?" Caleb felt heat creep up his neck. "I expect help running the ranch. Cooking, mending, garden work if you're inclined. Maybe help with the cattle when needed. In exchange, you'd have a home, your name on the deed if that matters, and whatever security I can provide. And the rest? He knew what she was asking. I'm not looking for romance, Mrs. Vale, or companionship beyond what's practical. You'd have your own room, your own space. I won't. There won't be expectations in that regard. Something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe, or approval. And if circumstances change? If you decide you want more? I won't. Men often do. I won't, he repeated, harder this time. I learned a long time ago to want only what I can actually have. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. My terms? I keep my own name, I keep my privacy, and I keep my gun. The gun's not negotiable? No. You planning to use it? I'm planning not to need to, but I keep it regardless. Caleb thought about the town's reaction, about how this armed, hard-eyed woman would be received by neighbors already suspicious of outsiders. Then he thought about another winter alone, about watching the ranch die by inches while he failed to hold it together. You can keep the gun, he said. Then we have an agreement. There's one more thing. He pushed off the wagon, uncomfortable. Town's got a justice of the peace, but he's drunk more often than not. Minister won't marry folks unless they've done proper courting, which we obviously haven't. So if we're doing this, it needs to be done right, legal and binding. I'm aware of marriage requirements, Mr. Vance. Caleb, he corrected again, and I mean we do it tomorrow. Soon as we can get witnesses and someone sober enough to make it official. No point dragging things out. Agreed. The ease of her acceptance should have reassured him. Instead, it made his unease sharpen. What kind of woman agreed to marry a stranger with less hesitation than most people showed buying a horse? But he was in no position to question good fortune, however strange its packaging. Come on, then. He grabbed her trunk from the wagon. I'll show you the house. The interior matched the exterior, worn but functional. The front room held a sagging couch, 2 chairs, a wood stove that had seen better decades. The kitchen was primitive, a cast-iron range, a pump sink that groaned when you worked it, shelves mostly bare except for basics. Pantry's low, Caleb admitted. I've been living on beans and jerky mostly. Rhea ran her finger along the dusty counter, examined the stove, opened the pantry door to assess its meager contents. Her expression revealed nothing. Upstairs, he said. 2 bedrooms separated by a narrow hall. The larger one held a bed with a questionable mattress, a dresser with a stuck drawer, and not much else. This would be yours, Caleb said. I've been using the smaller room. Seemed right to give you the better space. She walked to the window, looking out over the darkening land. It's sufficient. There's a well out back. Barn's got space if you want to set up a workspace. Chickens are half wild, but they lay occasionally. Nearest neighbor's 5 miles east, though they keep to themselves mostly. And the town? Hour's ride. Less if you push, nah. She turned from the window. When do I start? Start? Working. That's why I'm here, isn't it? Caleb had to admire her directness. No pretense, no playing at feminine helplessness, just clear-eyed assessment of the bargain they'd struck. Tomorrow's soon enough. Tonight you should rest. Get settled. I'm not tired. Then suit yourself. Kitchen could use a woman's touch, I suppose. He regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth. Presumptuous, old-fashioned, but Rhea just nodded. I'll see what I can do. Caleb left her to unpack, retreating to the barn under the pretense of checking on the horses. In reality, he needed distance, needed to process what he'd just done. He'd brought a stranger into his home, a woman who carried herself like a hired gun and looked at the world through eyes that had seen things he could only imagine. The smart thing would be to send her back on the next train. But Caleb Vance had stopped doing smart things about 3 years ago, right around the time his father died, and left him a ranch he couldn't maintain and debts he couldn't pay. Inside the barn, he found his best mare, Sadie, 15 years old and slowing down, had managed to get herself tangled in some old fence wire. Caleb cursed, grabbed wire cutters, and spent 20 minutes freeing her while she tossed her head and generally made his job harder. By the time he finished, full dark had fallen. Light glowed from the house windows, warmer somehow than when he'd left it. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting Rhea had figured out the temperamental stove. When he entered the kitchen, he stopped short. In the space of an hour, she'd transformed it. Not magically, the room was still worn and shabby, but there was order now where chaos had reigned. The dishes were washed and stacked, the floor had been swept, the stove glowed with properly banked coals, and something simmered in a pot, filling the room with a smell that made Caleb's stomach clench with sudden hunger. Rhea stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, kneading dough with efficient movements. She'd changed from her travel dress into something simpler, a plain brown work dress that had seen considerable use but was clean and mended. "Found flour in the back of your pantry," she said without looking up. "Weevils got most of it, but I salvaged enough for biscuits." "You didn't have to." "We had an agreement, Mr. Vance. I'm upholding my end." "Caleb," she paused in her kneading, finally meeting his eyes. "We're not married yet. When we are, I'll use your given name." He wasn't sure if it was propriety or distance she was maintaining. Maybe both. "Soups from dried beef and those sad-looking potatoes I found," she continued. "Won't win any prizes, but it's food." Caleb watched her work, struck by the economy of her movements. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She moved through this kitchen like someone who'd learned efficiency the hard way. "Where'd you learn to cook?" he asked. "Here and there." "Your mother?" "No." Another conversational dead end. Caleb gave up and sat at the small table, watching her finish the biscuits and slide them into the oven. She moved with the same controlled precision he'd noticed at the train station, aware of her surroundings, never quite relaxed. When she finally served the meal, Caleb had to admit it was the best thing he'd eaten in months. The soup was simple but well seasoned, the biscuits light despite the compromised flour. He ate 3 helpings while she picked at a single bowl. "You should eat more," he said. "You're too thin." "I eat enough." "You barely touched your food." "I said I eat enough." There was steel in her voice now, a warning. Caleb backed off. Whatever battles she'd fought with hunger weren't his business. Not yet, anyway. Maybe not ever, depending on how this arrangement worked out. After dinner, she cleaned up with the same silent efficiency. Caleb tried to help, but she waved him off, so he retreated to the front room and stared at the empty fireplace, trying to figure out what he'd gotten himself into. Eventually, Rhea emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. "I'm going to retire, if that's acceptable." "It's your house now, too. You don't need my permission." She nodded, started toward the stairs, then paused. "Mr. Vance, Caleb, earlier you asked why I chose Wyoming. You said you needed distance." "I did, but there's more to it." She turned to face him fully, and in the lamplight her features softened slightly. "I needed somewhere I could start over, somewhere no one knew me or cared about where I came from. Your letter offered that." "What are you running from?" "Does it matter?" "Might, if it's going to show up on my doorstep." She considered this. "It might. I can't promise it won't, but I can promise that if it does, I'll handle it. I won't let my past become your problem." "Little late for that, don't you think? We're getting married tomorrow." "We don't have to. I can catch the next train east and you can find someone else." But they both knew that wasn't true. There wouldn't be someone else. This was his one chance. "No," Caleb said. "We'll go through with it." Something like relief crossed her face, there and gone in an instant. "Then I'll see you in the morning." She climbed the stairs, her footsteps quiet but purposeful. Caleb heard the door to her room close, then silence. He sat in the growing dark for another hour, listening to the house settle around him. Somewhere upstairs, Rhea was probably doing the same. A stranger in a strange house, tied to a man she didn't know by desperation and convenience. It wasn't how either of them had planned their lives, he suspected. But then, plans had a way of meaning nothing when fate decided to intervene. The next morning dawned cold and clear, frost edging every blade of grass in silver. Caleb woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute he'd been stretching for weeks. He dressed quickly and descended to find Rhea already in the kitchen, breakfast laid out with the same efficiency she'd shown the night before. "Eggs?" she said by way of greeting. "Found them in the coop. Most of your chickens are too wild to catch, but a few are tame enough." "How early did you get up?" "Early enough." She poured him coffee. "We're getting married today. I wanted to be ready." Caleb studied her over the rim of his cup. She'd put on a different dress, still black but newer, less worn. Her hair was pulled back more formally. If he didn't know better, he'd think she was nervous. "You don't have to go through with this," he said. "Despite what I said last night, you can still back out. So can you." "I won't. Neither will I." She set a plate of eggs in front of him. "Eat. We should leave within the hour if we want to reach town in time." They made the journey in silence, the wagon bouncing over ruts worn deep by years of traffic. The morning sun burned off the frost, revealing the brown grass beneath, overgrazed, undernourished, dying slowly like everything else. Copper Falls looked different in morning light, less threatening, more pathetic. The buildings seemed to sag with exhaustion, the few people on the street moving with the defeated shuffle of those who'd stopped expecting better. Caleb pulled up in front of the church, small and white with that cracked bell. Reverend Matthews was supposed to meet them there, along with witnesses, probably whoever Caleb could round up on short notice. But as they climbed down from the wagon, Caleb noticed a crowd gathering. Too many people for a simple wedding, and their faces held something he didn't like. Old Man Jennings stepped forward, jaw set. "Caleb, word is you're planning to marry this woman." "That's right, Henry. This is Rhea Vale. She answered my advertisement." "We know who she is." Sarah Chen pushed through the crowd, arms crossed. "Or rather, we know what she is." Caleb felt Rhea stiffen beside him. "Meaning?" "Meaning a woman who travels alone, carries a gun, and looks at folks like she's sizing them up for killing ain't the kind of woman this town needs." Sarah's voice rose, gathering confidence from the murmuring crowd. "We got families here, Caleb. Children. We can't have someone like her around." "Someone like her?" Caleb's voice went flat and dangerous. "You mean someone who minds her own business and doesn't gossip like a murder of crows?" "Now hold on," Jennings started. "No, you hold on." Caleb stepped forward, and the crowd shifted back slightly. "I advertised for a wife." She answered. "That's between her and me." "What business is it of yours?" "It's our business when you bring trouble into our town," Tom Wilson called from the back. "That woman's got killer written all over her. We don't want her kind here." Caleb felt Rhea's hand on his arm, light, restraining. When he glanced at her, her expression remained perfectly calm, but her eyes had gone cold as winter stone. "Perhaps they're right," she said quietly. "Perhaps I should go." "The hell you will." "Caleb!" "No." He turned back to the crowd, anger finally overwhelming caution. "You people want to talk about killers? Half of you came west running from something. Tom, didn't you leave Missouri one step ahead of the law? And Sarah, your late husband, did he actually die, or did you just stop looking for him when you got tired of the beatings?" Sarah's face went scarlet. Tom took a step forward, but Jennings grabbed his arm. "This is different," Jennings said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Is it? Or is it just that you're scared of a woman who won't pretend to be helpless?" Caleb looked at each of them in turn. "I need help on my ranch. She needs a home. We're both adults making our own choices. If that offends your delicate sensibilities, I suggest you mind your own damn business." "We're just trying to look out for you," Mrs. Patterson called from her wagon. "Your father was a good man, Caleb. He wouldn't want you mixing up with someone like her." "My father's dead." The words came out harder than Caleb intended. "And what he'd want doesn't matter anymore. This is my choice. Now either someone gets the Reverend, or Rhea and I ride to the next county and get married there. Either way, it's happening." The crowd muttered, unhappy but uncertain. Caleb had pushed back harder than they expected. In a place where survival depended on cooperation, open defiance carried weight. Finally, Jennings sighed. "Reverend's inside. Been waiting for you." He looked at Rhea, assessment in his eyes. "But Caleb's right. This ain't our business. Doesn't mean we have to like it." "Ma, I don't give a damn if you like it or not," Caleb said. The crowd dispersed slowly, throwing glances back at Rhea that ranged from suspicious to hostile. Only Sarah Chen lingered. "You be careful," she said to Caleb. "That one's poison. I can see it." "Then you're looking at the wrong things." Sarah shook her head and walked away. When they were finally alone, Rhea turned to him. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. They'll hold it against you." "Let them." "Caleb," she stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "You defended me." "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because they were wrong. And because whatever you're running from, you're here now. That makes you my responsibility. I'm not your responsibility yet. We're not married. Near enough. He offered his arm. Come on, let's make it official before I lose my nerve. She took his arm, her grip light but steady. Inside, the church smelled of dust and old hymn books. Reverend Matthews waited by the altar, a tired-looking man with thinning hair and the slightly dazed expression of someone who'd given up trying to save a community that didn't want saving. Caleb, he said by way of greeting. This is the woman? Rhea Vale. Rhea, Reverend Matthews. Matthews nodded. I'll need witnesses. As if summoned, the door opened. Doc Morrison entered, followed by Marcus Webb from the general store. Both men looked uncomfortable but determined. Figured you'd need folks, Marcus said. Whatever the town thinks, a man's got a right to marry who he chooses. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. Appreciate it, Marcus. The ceremony was brief. Matthews rushed through the words like he had somewhere more important to be. Rhea's responses came clear and steady. Caleb's voice shook slightly on the vows, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what he was doing. Do you, Caleb Vance, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Rhea Vale, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? A pause, barely perceptible. Then, I do. Then by the power vested in me by Wyoming territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Matthews closed his book with more force than necessary. You may kiss the bride, though I suspect neither of you is much interested in that. He was right. Caleb and Rhea looked at each other, then away. Matthews sighed. Marcus, John, if you'll sign as witnesses. He pulled out the marriage certificate, already filled in with their names. They signed. It was done. Caleb Vance was married to a woman he'd met less than 24 hours ago. A woman who carried secrets like weapons and looked at the world through eyes that had forgotten how to trust. Congratulations, Marcus said, clearly meaning it. You're braver than most, Caleb. Or stupider. Sometimes there's not much difference. Outside, the street had emptied. The town had made its judgment and moved on. Caleb helped Rhea into the wagon. She still didn't need the help, but he offered anyway, and they began the ride back to the ranch. Neither spoke for miles. Finally, as they crested the rise above the ranch, Rhea broke the silence. Thank you. For what? For defending me. For not backing down. Told you, you're my responsibility now. That's not why you did it. No? He glanced at her. Why then? Because you're tired of people telling you how to live. Because you're angry at a world that took away your choices. She met his eyes. Because defending me was also defending yourself. She was right, though Caleb hadn't fully realized it until she said it. The town's judgment had been as much about him as her, about his failure, his desperation, his willingness to break their unspoken rules. Maybe, he admitted. Does it matter? I suppose not. Either way, you gave me something I haven't had in a long time. What's that? Someone willing to stand with me instead of against me. The simple honesty of it hit him harder than he expected. How long had she been alone? How many times had she faced down hostile crowds with no one at her back? Well, he said gruffly, you've got that now, for whatever it's worth. It's worth more than you know. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence. When they reached the ranch, Caleb unhitched the horses while Rhea went inside. He took his time with the animals, giving her space, giving himself space to process the reality of his situation. He was married. To a stranger. To a woman who might be dangerous, might be running from something worse, might bring trouble down on both of them. But as he led the horses to their stalls, he realized something else. For the first time in 3 years, the ranch didn't feel quite so empty. The house, when he looked at it, seemed less like a monument to failure and more like a place where people actually lived. It wasn't much, but it was something. Inside, he found Rhea had already changed into work clothes and started on the midday meal. She moved through the kitchen with that same efficient grace, completely at home in a space she'd occupied for less than a day. What needs doing this afternoon? She asked as she sliced bread. Got fence down on the north pasture. If we don't fix it soon, what cattle we have left will wander. I can help. You know fence work? I can learn. So that afternoon, they rode out together to the broken fence line. Caleb showed her how to string wire, how to set posts, how to work the stretcher that pulled everything tight. She learned quickly, her hands soon as blistered as his, but never complaining. They worked until the sun dropped toward the horizon, then rode back in gathering darkness. The temperature plummeted with the sun's retreat, and Caleb saw Rhea shiver despite her coat. Cold doesn't agree with you, he observed. I'll adjust. Where are you from? Originally, she hesitated. East. Doesn't matter where exactly. Might help me understand you better. You don't need to understand me. You just need me to work. We're married now. I figure I'm entitled to know something about you. She reined in her horse, Caleb's old mare, who'd taken to her immediately, and turned to face him. In the dying light, her features were half shadow, unreadable. What do you want to know, Caleb? The use of his first name surprised him, a small concession to their changed relationship. Anything? Everything? I don't know, where you learned to shoot, why you carry that gun like you expect to use it, what you're afraid of. I'm not afraid. Everyone's afraid of something. She looked away toward the darkening mountains. Being found. By who? People from my past, people I hoped were done with me. She gathered the reins, prepared to move on. That's all you're getting tonight. Maybe more later, maybe not. But that's where we start. Caleb wanted to press, but something in her tone warned him off. They'd made progress today. Small steps toward understanding. Pushing too hard would only drive her back behind those walls she'd built so carefully. Fair enough, he said. They rode on in silence. That night, after another simple meal, they settled into an uneasy routine. Rhea retreated to her room early. Caleb sat by the stove, listening to the wind pick up outside, rattling the windows and finding every gap in the house's defenses. Somewhere above him, his new wife was probably doing the same, lying awake in a strange bed, in a strange house, tied to a strange man by legal bonds that felt more like a gamble than a promise. He wondered if she regretted it yet. He wondered if he did. But as the night deepened and the cold pressed in, Caleb found himself grateful for her presence. The house felt different with someone else in it, less haunted by failure, less heavy with loneliness. It wasn't love. It might never be love. But it was something, and for now, that would have to be enough. The first week passed in a rhythm of work and silence. Rhea rose before dawn each morning, had coffee ready by the time Caleb stumbled downstairs. They ate breakfast without much conversation, then split up to tackle the endless list of tasks a failing ranch demanded. She took to the work like she'd been born to it, though Caleb suspected her calloused hands came from harder labor than cooking and mending. By the third day, she'd reorganized the entire pantry, culled the chicken flock down to the productive hens, and started a vegetable garden in a patch of ground Caleb had written off as useless. She moved through each task with that same controlled efficiency, never wasting motion, never complaining. But she also never relaxed. Caleb noticed it in the way she positioned herself, always with her back to a wall, always with clear sight lines to doors and windows. The way her hand drifted toward her hip whenever hoofbeats sounded in the distance. The way she went still and alert at sounds most people wouldn't even register. On the fourth morning, he found her in the barn before sunrise, mucking out stalls in the dark. You know we have lamps, he said from the doorway. She didn't startle, probably heard him coming from 50 yards out. Didn't want to waste oil. Rhea, we're not that poor, not yet anyway. Habit. She kept working, pitchfork moving in steady rhythm. I'm used to making do with less. Caleb lit a lantern anyway, hung it on a nail. In the warm light, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the shadows under her eyes. You're not sleeping. I sleep enough. That's what you said about eating. I'm starting to think you don't know what enough means. She stopped, leaned on the pitchfork. Why do you care? Because you're my wife. Because if you collapse from exhaustion, I'm back to doing everything alone. Practical reasons, then. Mostly. Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. At least you're honest about it. They worked together until breakfast, then spent the morning repairing the barn roof where winter storms had torn shingles loose. Rhea climbed the ladder without hesitation, balanced on the steep pitch like she'd done it 100 times. Below, Caleb handed up supplies and tried not to think about what would happen if she fell. You're good at this, he called up. The work. I mean, where'd you learn? Here and there. Her standard answer. That's not really an answer. It's the one you're getting. Caleb hammered in a nail with more force than necessary. We're married, Rhea. Eventually you're going to have to tell me something real about yourself. Why? Because that's what married people do. They talk. They share things. We agreed this was practical. Romance not required. That's what your letter said. I'm not asking for romance. I'm asking for basic human conversation. She was quiet for a long moment, focused on aligning a shingle. Then, my father was a carpenter. Before he died, he taught me some. That real enough for you? It was more than she'd offered before. Caleb decided to take the opening. How old were you when he died? 12? I'm sorry. Don't be. He drank himself to death. Probably a mercy for everyone involved. The bitterness in her tone shut down further questions. They finished the roof in silence. That afternoon, while Caleb rode out to check the cattle, Rhea stayed behind to work on the garden. When he returned hours later, he found she'd cleared twice the area he expected, turned the soil, and started building a fence to keep out deer and rabbits. She was covered in dirt, sweat dampening her hair despite the cool temperature. But there was something different in her expression. Not quite contentment, but maybe the shadow of it, like the physical labor had quieted something restless inside her. You didn't have to do all this today, Caleb said, dismounting. I wanted to finish. Why? She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. Because if I finish something, it's done. Can't be taken away, can't be left undone. It's finished. Caleb heard the weight behind those words. Years of unfinished things, interrupted plans, losses that came before completion. He wanted to ask, but the walls were already going back up in her expression. Looks good, he said instead. Better than anything I could have done. That's not saying much. You're a terrible gardener. It was the first joke she'd made, dry as dust, but definitely humor. Caleb found himself smiling. Can't argue with that. My father used to say I could kill a cactus. Is that why you're a rancher instead of a farmer? Rancher's a generous term for what I am. Cattle keeper, maybe. Professional failure, more accurately. You're still here, still trying. That's not failure. Feels like it most days. Rhea looked at him directly, those gray eyes assessing. Failure is when you stop trying. You haven't done that yet. Give me time. I don't think you will. She gathered her tools. You're too stubborn. Over dinner, venison stew from a deer Caleb had shot 2 days prior, they fell into easier conversation. Nothing deep, just the small observations of people learning to share space. Rhea mentioned the fence on the east pasture was worse than Caleb thought. He told her about the calf born late in the season, probably wouldn't survive winter. She suggested they bring it closer to the barn, try to save it. Waste of effort, Caleb said. Late calves rarely make it. So we don't try. I'm being practical. You're being defeated. She set down her spoon. We try anyway. If it dies, it dies. But at least we tried. Caleb wanted to argue, but something in her intensity stopped him. This wasn't really about the calf, he realized. This was about not giving up, about fighting even when the odds were terrible. All right, he said. We'll try. The next morning, they brought the calf and its anxious mother into the barn. The calf was weak, barely able to stand, but Rhea worked with it patiently, getting it to nurse, keeping it warm, checking on it every few hours through the day and night. Caleb found her in the barn after midnight, sitting in the straw beside the calf, hand resting on its bony ribs. You should sleep, he said. In a while. He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. The barn was quiet, except for the shuffle of horses and the small sounds of the calf breathing. Why does this matter so much? He asked. Because it's a life, because it deserves a chance. She didn't look at him. Because if we can save this one thing, maybe all the rest isn't pointless. You really believe that? I have to. They sat in the darkness for a while, not speaking. Finally, Caleb stood. I'll take the next watch. You get some sleep. Caleb, I mean it. Go. She went, and Caleb spent the next 3 hours watching a calf struggle to live, wondering what kind of woman he'd married. Someone running from a past she wouldn't name, Someone who worked herself to exhaustion. Someone who fought for lost causes because giving up wasn't in her. The calf survived the night, and the next. By the end of the week, it was standing on its own, nursing regularly. Rhea never said I told you so, but Caleb saw the satisfaction in her eyes. 2 weeks into the marriage, Caleb needed supplies from town. He asked Rhea if she wanted to come. Better if I don't, she said. They made their feelings clear. You can't hide out here forever. Watch me. Rhea, I'm not hiding. I'm choosing my battles. She was kneading bread dough, hands working the mass with controlled aggression. They don't want me there. I don't want to be there. Everyone's happy. You're not happy. I'm alive and safe. That's close enough. Caleb left her there and rode into Copper Falls alone. The town's reception was cold but not openly hostile. People nodded, asked about his wife with barely concealed curiosity. He kept his answers short. At the general store, Marcus Webb totaled up his purchases. How's married life? Fine. She working out? As a ranch hand, I mean. Better than I expected. Marcus leaned closer, voice dropping. Tom Wilson's been talking. Says she's got a bounty on her head, that you married a wanted woman. Caleb's hand tightened on the counter. Tom Wilson's a drunk and a liar. Maybe, but people are talking. Just thought you should know. Let them talk. They've got nothing better to do anyway. He loaded the supplies and headed home, anger simmering. By the time he reached the ranch, it had crystallized into determination. Rhea was in the garden, harvesting the first lettuce. She looked up as he approached, read something in his expression. What happened? Nothing. Town gossip. He started unloading. They're saying you're wanted, that I married a criminal. She went very still. What did you tell them? That they should mind their own business. Did they believe you? Don't care if they did or not. He set down a sack of flour harder than necessary. Are you? Wanted, I mean? Rhea met his eyes without flinching. Depends on who's doing the wanting. That's not an answer. It's the best one you're getting right now. Damn it, Rhea. What do you want me to say? Her voice rose, the first real emotion he'd heard from her. That I'm running from something? I already told you that. That my past might catch up? I told you that too. You married me anyway. I did. But I'm entitled to know what I'm up against. You're entitled to what I choose to tell you. Nothing more. They stared at each other across the wagon, tension crackling between them. Then Rhea turned away, walked back toward the garden. Forget I asked, Caleb called after her. She didn't respond. They circled each other warily for the rest of the day, conversation stilted, eye contact minimal. That night, Caleb sat in the front room while Rhea stayed in the kitchen. The house had never felt bigger. Around midnight, he heard her footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. I was married before, she said without preamble. To Thomas Caldwell, like I wrote in my letter. But he wasn't killed in a mining accident. Caleb waited, sensing more coming. He was shot by men who worked for a man named Victor Hale. She wrapped the shawl tighter. Thomas owed money, a lot of money. When he couldn't pay, they killed him. Would have killed me too, but I got away. How long ago? 2 years. I've been running since. And this Victor Hale? He's still looking for you? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. She sat down in the other chair, still maintaining distance. Thomas wasn't a good man. He gambled, drank, made promises he couldn't keep. I knew that when I married him. But I was young and stupid and thought I could change him. You loved him? I thought I did. Turned out I just loved the idea of not being alone. She stared into the empty fireplace. After he died, I took what money I could find and ran. Worked my way west, changed my name, tried to disappear. Hence Rhea Vale instead of Caldwell. Vale was my mother's maiden name, safer than Caldwell. Caleb processed this. The gun, you know how to use it because I learned I had to. Because being helpless gets you killed. Her hand moved unconsciously toward her hip. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I'm alive. That counts for something. Have you killed anyone? The question hung between them. Rhea's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. If I said yes, would you send me away? I don't know, Caleb answered honestly. Depends on the circumstances, I guess. Fair enough. She stood, I've done what I had to do to survive. If that makes me a bad person, so be it, but I've never killed anyone who wasn't trying to kill me first. It wasn't a no, but it was more honesty than he'd expected. Thank you, he said, for telling me. You're my husband. You deserve to know. She moved toward the stairs. But Caleb, if they find me, if this Victor Hale or his men show up, I won't let you fight my battles. This is my problem. We're married. Your problems are my problems. No. Some debts you can't share. She climbed the stairs before he could argue. After that night, something shifted between them. Not trust exactly, but understanding. They were both carrying weight. His, the ranch, and his father's legacy. Hers, the ghosts of a violent past. Neither could fully share the burden, but at least now they acknowledged it existed. The work continued. Rhea proved herself capable at everything she attempted. She learned to saddle horses, mend tack, even help with the cattle when Caleb needed an extra pair of hands. She was fearless in a way that sometimes worried him, pushing herself harder than necessary. One afternoon, 3 weeks into the marriage, they were moving cattle to fresh pasture when one of the bulls, a mean-tempered bastard Caleb had been meaning to sell, decided to challenge Rhea's horse. The bull lowered its head, pawed the ground, every muscle tensed for a charge. "Rhea, back away slowly," Caleb called. Instead, she urged her horse forward, putting herself between the bull and the rest of the herd. The bull charged. Her horse, old Sadie, who'd seen 1,000 bulls, stood her ground while Rhea swung a rope, cracking it like a whip inches from the bull's nose. The bull skidded to a stop, confused. Rhea cracked the rope again, yelling in a voice that carried authority Caleb had never heard from her. The bull turned, trotted back to the herd like a chastised child. Caleb rode up beside her. That was either very brave or very stupid. Couldn't let him think he could challenge us. Her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, not fear. If he wins once, he'll try again. Where'd you learn to handle cattle? I didn't, I just know bullies. You show them you won't back down. They usually fold. Usually isn't always. No, but usually's good enough odds for me. That night at dinner, Caleb studied her across the table. She'd lost some of the gauntness she'd arrived with. Regular meals were filling her out, giving her face less of that hollow, haunted look. Her hands, though still quick to move toward her gun, didn't hover there quite as constantly. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "Sorry, just thinking." About? About how you've changed since you got here. Or maybe haven't changed. Hard to tell. She set down her fork. What do you mean? You seem less on edge most of the time, but then something will happen. A noise. A stranger on the road. And you're right back to that woman who stepped off the train. All sharp edges and coiled tension. Old habits. More than that, I think. Rhea was quiet for a moment. When you spend years looking over your shoulder, expecting the worst, it becomes part of you. I can't just turn that off because I'm married and living on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. I'm not asking you to, just observing. Well, don't. I don't need to be analyzed. Fair enough. But Caleb kept watching anyway, cataloging the small changes. The way she'd started humming sometimes while she worked. How she'd moved a chair in her room to face the window, probably so she could watch the road. The fact that she'd stopped flinching every time he entered a room unexpectedly. Trust was building, slow and fragile as new ice on a pond. Then, 4 weeks into the marriage, everything changed. They'd ridden into town for supplies. Rhea had finally agreed to come, though she kept her hat pulled low and avoided eye contact with townsfolk. Caleb was loading flour into the wagon when he heard voices raised in argument. He turned to see 3 men confronting Rhea outside the general store. Ranch hands from the Wilson spread by the look of them. One, a big man with a red face and whiskey on his breath, had her backed against the wall. "You're that mail order woman," Redface was saying. "The one thinks she's too good to talk to regular folks." "I don't think anything. Now move aside." Rhea's voice was level, but Caleb heard the warning in it. "Make me." Caleb started toward them, but before he'd taken 3 steps, Redface made his mistake. He reached for Rhea's arm. What happened next occurred so fast, Caleb almost missed it. Rhea's hand caught Redface's wrist, twisted it at an angle that made the big man yelp. Her other hand came up to his throat, not quite touching, but the threat clear. And suddenly, she had a knife Caleb hadn't known she carried, the blade resting against Redface's gut. "I said move." Rhea repeated, voice like winter frost. The other two ranch hands scrambled backward. Redface went pale, suddenly very sober. Jesus Christ, lady. Not lady, Mrs. Vance. And if you touch me again, I won't stop at threats. She released him, stepped back, the knife disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Redface stumbled away, his friends helping him. The crowd that had gathered, because of course there was a crowd, stared at Rhea with expressions ranging from shock to fear to something uncomfortably close to vindication. Sarah Chen stood in front of her boarding house, arms crossed. See? She called to anyone who'd listen. I told you she was dangerous. Rhea ignored her, walked calmly to the wagon, climbed up without a word. Caleb finished loading in silence, feeling the weight of a dozen stares. When he climbed up beside Rhea, her face was perfectly composed, but her hands shook slightly in her lap. They rode out of town without speaking. Only when Copper Falls had disappeared behind them did Caleb break the silence. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He was drunk, stupid. You could have just walked away. And let him think he could put his hands on me? Let every other man in that town think I'm easy prey. She turned to him, eyes blazing. I've spent too many years being grabbed and groped and treated like property. Not anymore. Never again. The raw pain in her voice stopped any argument. Caleb drove in silence, piecing together implications he didn't want to face. Your husband, he said carefully. Thomas. He hurt you. Among other things. And after he died, I learned to fight back. Learned that being small and female didn't mean being helpless. Learned to hurt people before they could hurt me. That man today wasn't trying to hurt you. He was just drunk and stupid. This time. What about next time? Or the time after? She wrapped her arms around herself. You don't understand, Caleb. You can't. You're a man. You walk through the world not having to think about who might grab you, who might force themselves on you, who might decide you're less than human because you lack the right equipment between your legs. You're right. I don't understand. But I'm trying to. Don't. Just accept that I'll do what I need to do to stay safe. And if that makes your town uncomfortable, that's their problem, not mine. They didn't speak again until they reached the ranch. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He kept seeing that knife appear in Rhea's hand, kept hearing the certainty in her voice when she threatened a man twice her size. She'd meant it, every word. Around 2 a.m, he heard footsteps downstairs. He found Rhea in the kitchen, making coffee in the dark. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. She jumped, actually jumped, before recognizing him. You shouldn't sneak up on people. Sorry. Thought you heard me coming. I was distracted. He lit a lamp, saw her face properly. The composure had cracked. She looked young suddenly, uncertain. I'm sorry, she said. For today. For causing trouble. You didn't cause anything. That drunk caused it. But I made it worse. I could have handled it differently. How? I don't know. Just better. Caleb poured himself coffee, sat down across from her. You protected yourself. Nothing wrong with that. There is, when it confirms everything they already think about me. That I'm dangerous. That I don't belong. She wrapped her hands around her cup. I ruined it for you. They'll hold this against you. Let them. Caleb, I mean it. You think I care what Tom Wilson or Sarah Chen think? They're small-minded gossips with nothing better to do than judge people trying to survive. He met her eyes. You're my wife. You did what you had to do. I'm not going to apologize for that. Even though it makes your life harder? My life was already hard. At least now it's hard with someone watching my back. Something shifted in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or relief, or something more complicated than either. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me for basic decency. They sat in companionable silence, drinking coffee while the night pressed against the windows. Outside, an owl called. Somewhere distant, a coyote answered. The knife, Caleb said eventually. Where do you keep it? Boot. Easier access than you'd think. And the gun? Thigh holster. Sometimes waist, depending on what I'm wearing. Anything else I should know about? She smiled slightly. A lady never reveals all her secrets. You're a lot of things, Rhea, but I'm not sure lady's one of them. Probably not. Is that a problem? No, ladies wouldn't last a week out here. After that night, they settled into a new understanding. Rhea was dangerous, Caleb accepted that, but she was also loyal, hardworking, and increasingly essential to the ranch's survival. The garden she'd planted was producing. The chickens were laying better than they had in years. She'd reorganized the barn so efficiently that Caleb could find tools he'd lost months ago. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she was becoming less of a stranger and more of a partner. They still slept in separate rooms, still maintained distance, but the distance was friendly now, comfortable rather than wary. Until the day a stranger rode up to the ranch and shattered the fragile peace they'd built. Caleb was repairing a section of corral fence when he heard the horse, single rider, coming fast from the east. He straightened, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun, watching a dark figure materialize from the heat shimmer on the horizon. Rhea appeared from the barn, wiping her hands on her apron. But the moment she saw the approaching rider, her entire body went rigid. The color drained from her face. "Get in the house," she said, voice tight. "What? Why?" "Get in the house, Caleb. Now." He'd never heard that tone from her before. Not commanding, but something closer to pleading. He looked from her to the rider, now close enough to make out details. A man on a fine horse, too fine for these parts. Wearing a suit jacket despite the heat, hat tilted at an angle that suggested confidence bordering on arrogance. "You know him," Caleb said. "Yes, and you need to get inside." "Like hell I do. This is my property." The rider slowed as he approached, taking in the ranch with eyes that missed nothing. He was maybe 40, with sharp features and a smile that never reached his eyes. Everything about him screamed money and danger in equal measure. He stopped 20 feet from where Rhea stood frozen. His smile widened. "Well, well, Iris Caldwell, or should I say Iris Vale? Or is it something else now?" His voice was cultured, Eastern, with an edge like a blade wrapped in silk. "You've led me on quite the chase, my dear." Rhea said nothing. Her hand had moved to her hip, hovering near her gun. The man noticed. Now, let's not be hasty. I'm not here for violence, just a conversation between old friends." "We were never friends, Victor." Victor. The name hit Caleb like a punch. Victor Hale, the man Rhea had told him about. The man whose people killed her husband. Hale's smile never wavered. "Perhaps not, but we were business associates, weren't we? Through your late husband's unfortunate dealings. Thomas is dead. Whatever he owed died with him." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong, Iris. You see, debts don't die. They transfer. And when your beloved Thomas couldn't pay what he owed, the debt became yours." Caleb stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Rhea. "This is private property. You need to state your business or move along." Hale's attention shifted to him, those cold eyes taking measure. "And you are?" "Caleb Vance, this is my ranch." "Is it now?" Hale's gaze moved between them, calculating. "How interesting. Tell me, mister." "Vance, does your wife here ever mention her past? Her real name, the people looking for her?" "My wife's past is her own business." "Noble, but foolish." Hale dismounted with practiced ease, his horse, a black gelding worth more than Caleb's entire herd, standing perfectly still. "You see, Iris here witnessed something. Something that could cause me considerable trouble if she decided to share it with, say, territorial authorities." "I've kept quiet for 2 years, Rhea said. Her voice was steadier now, but Caleb could see her jaw clenched tight. "I have no interest in your business, Victor. I just want to be left alone. And I'd love to accommodate you, truly, I would. But you understand my position. As long as you're alive and free, you're a liability, a loose end. Then why are you here instead of just killing me?" The bluntness of her question startled Caleb, though Hale merely looked amused. "Because I'm a civilized man, Iris. I don't waste resources when a simpler solution exists." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. $5,000, enough to disappear properly. "Take the money, get on a train heading east, and never speak a word about what you saw in Denver. We both move on with our lives." "And if I refuse?" Hale's smile finally faded. "Then I stop being civilized." Caleb's hand moved toward his own gun, an old Colt his father had carried. "I think you should leave." "Mr. Vance, this doesn't concern you." "She's my wife. That makes it my concern." "Your wife?" Hale actually laughed. "Did she tell you she was married? That this makes her Mrs. Vance in the eyes of the law?" We were married 4 weeks ago, legal and binding. Something flickered in Hale's expression, surprise, then calculation, then something darker. How very interesting. And does this marriage change anything, Iris? Does having a husband make you feel safe? Safer than I was. Safe enough to turn down my generous offer? Ria's hand finally dropped away from her gun. She stepped forward, chin raised. I don't want your money, Victor. I want you gone. I want to live my life without looking over my shoulder. Then give me what I want. Assurance. A guarantee that you'll never speak of what you know. You have it. You've had it for 2 years. Words are cheap. I need something more binding. Like what? Hale's smile returned, colder than before. Come back with me. Voluntarily. Work for me for, say, 5 years. After that, you'll have earned your freedom, and I'll have the assurance I need. The proposal hung in the air like poison. Caleb felt rage building in his chest, hot and immediate. Absolutely not, he said. I wasn't asking you, Mr. Vance. I don't care. The answer's no. Hale ignored him, focusing entirely on Ria. 5 years, Iris. You know what I require. The work you did for Thomas before he became unreliable. You were quite good at it, as I recall. I'm not that person anymore. Aren't you? I saw how you reached for that gun. How you positioned yourself with perfect tactical awareness. You can play at being a rancher's wife, but we both know what you really are. Get off my land, Caleb said, voice dropping to something dangerous. Now. Hale finally looked at him, really looked at him. Whatever he saw made him reassess. You love her. How quaint. I said get off my land. Or what? You'll shoot me? There are 6 men waiting a mile out, Mr. Vance. If I don't return within the hour, they'll come. And they won't be as diplomatic as I've been. Let them come. Brave words, but bravery doesn't stop bullets. Hale mounted his horse in one smooth motion. I'll give you until tomorrow noon, Iris. Make your choice. Come with me voluntarily, or I take you by force. And your new husband can watch, or he can die trying to stop me. Either way, you're coming. He wheeled his horse and rode off, disappearing into the distance with the same confidence he'd arrived with. The moment he was out of sight, Ria's knees buckled. Caleb caught her, felt her trembling against him. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I should have kept running, should never have stopped here. Don't. He helped her to the porch, sat her down. Just tell me everything, right now, no more half-truths. She took a shaky breath, then another. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. Thomas didn't just gamble. He worked for Victor, collecting debts, mostly. Sometimes enforcement when people refused to pay. I knew what he did, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my business. But it became your business. Thomas got ambitious, started skimming money, thought Victor wouldn't notice. He was wrong. Her hands twisted in her lap. Victor sent men to teach him a lesson. They beat him badly. Would have killed him, but I was there. I saw everything. Saw who gave the orders, saw what they did. And then? Then Thomas made it worse. He tried to blackmail Victor, threatened to go to the territorial marshal with what we knew. Victor doesn't take threats well. Caleb could guess the rest. They killed him. In front of me, made me watch. Then Victor gave me a choice. Work for him, keep quiet about what I'd seen, or die beside my husband. She met Caleb's eyes. I chose to live. I worked for Victor for 3 months. Collections mostly. Sometimes worse. What's worse? You don't want to know. I do. She looked away. Convincing people to pay. Whatever it took. I was good at it. Small woman, people underestimated me. Made the job easier. Caleb processed this, trying to reconcile the woman who'd saved a dying calf with someone who'd worked as an enforcer for a crime boss. And then you ran, he said. I found out Victor was planning something big, something that would draw federal attention. I realized if I stayed, I'd either end up dead or in prison. So I stole money from one of Victor's collections, changed my name, and disappeared. How much money? $800. Jesus, Ria. I know, but it was enough to get me west, to survive until I found your advertisement. She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. I thought I was far enough away. Thought he'd given up looking. I was wrong. Caleb stood, paced the porch. His mind raced through options, discarding them as fast as they came. They couldn't run. Hale's men would find them. They couldn't fight, 6 men against 2, one of whom had never been in a real gunfight. They couldn't go to the law. Hale probably had marshals and judges in his pocket. There has to be a way out, he said. There isn't. I either go with him or people die, probably starting with you. So you're just going to give up? Let him take you? What choice do I have? Her voice broke. Caleb, I've seen what Victor does to people who defy him. I've helped him do it. He's not bluffing about those 6 men. He's not bluffing about any of it. Caleb stopped pacing, looked at her, really looked at her. She'd curled in on herself, every bit of the strength and control she usually carried completely gone. This was fear, real and overwhelming. The kind that came from knowing exactly how bad things could get. Do you want to go with him? He asked quietly. Of course not. Then we fight. We'll lose. Maybe. But I'd rather die fighting than live knowing I let someone take my wife. Ria's head snapped up. Your wife? We've been married a month, Caleb. You barely know me. This isn't your fight. You're wrong. It became my fight the moment I said I do. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I'm not a hero, Ria. I'm just a man trying to hold on to a failing ranch. But I know what it's like to feel trapped, to think there's no way out. And I know that sometimes the only choice is to stand your ground. Even if it gets you killed? Even then. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. Why? Because you're my wife. Because you saved that calf when I said it was pointless. Because you fix things instead of giving up on them. He met her eyes. Because in a month, you've made this place feel less like a tomb and more like a home. That's worth fighting for. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away roughly. You're an idiot. Probably. We're going to die. Maybe. And you're okay with that? No. But I'm less okay with letting him take you. They sat in silence as the sun crept toward the horizon. Caleb's mind kept working, trying to find an angle, a strategy, anything that might give them a chance. Tell me about these 6 men, he finally said. What are we dealing with? Ria pulled herself together, that tactical awareness returning to her expression. If Victor brought his usual crew, they'll be experienced, not just thugs, actual gunmen, professional. How professional? The kind who've killed before and will again without hesitation. Wonderful. And we have me, who's a decent shot at targets that don't shoot back. And you. I'm better than decent, Ria said. But I'm not a gunfighter. I know how to survive, how to hurt people who get too close. But 6 trained men in an open fight? She shook her head. We'd need a miracle. Then we don't fight them in the open. This is our ground. We know it, they don't. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we make them come to us, on our terms, not Victor's. A spark of something, hope maybe, or just desperate determination, flickered in Ria's eyes. You have a plan? Not yet. But we have until noon tomorrow. That's enough time to prepare. They spent the rest of the daylight taking inventory. 2 rifles, Caleb's Winchester and his father's old Henry. 3 pistols. Caleb's Colt, Ria's smaller revolver, and a spare piece Caleb had forgotten he owned. Ammunition for all of them, though not as much as he'd like. A shotgun with a dozen shells. Not exactly an arsenal, Ria observed. No, but it's what we have. They worked into the night, preparing the ranch as best they could. Caleb moved furniture in the house, creating barriers and cover. Ria checked sight lines, identified defensive positions, pointed out weak spots in their perimeter. Around midnight, they took a break. Caleb made coffee while Ria studied a rough map she'd drawn of the ranch layout. They'll come from multiple directions, she said. Victor's not stupid. He'll surround us, cut off escape routes. So we don't try to escape. We hold the house. For how long? They can wait us out. Not if we make it costly enough. If we hurt them bad enough early, maybe they'll reconsider. Victor doesn't reconsider. He escalates. Caleb set down his coffee cup. Then what do you suggest? I go with him. Tonight. Before tomorrow's deadline. I tell him you tried to stop me, that I'm choosing to leave. It's the only way you survive this. No. Caleb, I said no. He stood, frustration boiling over. Stop trying to sacrifice yourself. We're in this together. You don't understand what you're asking. Victor won't just kill you clean. He'll make it hurt. He'll make sure I watch, make sure I know it's my fault. That's how he operates. Then we better make sure he doesn't get the chance. Rhea stood too, facing him across the kitchen table. Why are you doing this? We barely know each other. This marriage, it's paper, Caleb, a transaction. You don't owe me your life. Maybe not, but I owe myself the chance to be something other than a failure. The words came out harder than he intended. My father built this ranch from nothing, worked himself to death trying to make it succeed. And what have I done? Let it fall apart, piece by piece. Let the herd dwindle, the buildings rot, the land go to waste. That's not your fault, isn't it? I gave up, Rhea. Long before you got here, I'd already decided this place was dying and there was nothing I could do about it. He met her eyes. Then you showed up, started fixing things, planting gardens, saving calves I'd written off, making me remember what it feels like to care about something other than just surviving another day. So this is about the ranch? No. This is about refusing to give up again, about standing for something, even if it's just the principle that you can't take what's mine without a fight. I'm not yours. We agreed, you're my wife. That means something to me, even if it's just a legal arrangement to you. He softened his voice. Look, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to stay after this is over, if we somehow survive. But while you're here, while you're still my wife, I'm going to protect what's mine, and that includes you. Rhea stared at him, something shifting in her expression. You really mean that? Every word. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved around the table, stood directly in front of him. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of 2 years running finally catching up with her. I killed a man once, she said. In Denver, before I ran. One of Victor's collectors tried to assault me in an alley. I put my knife in his throat, watched him bleed out. Did he deserve it? He was trying to rape me, so yes. Then I don't care. You should. It makes me a killer, Caleb. The kind of person your town already thinks I am. It makes you a survivor. There's a difference. Is there? Her voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes I'm not sure anymore. Caleb did something he'd never done before. He reached out, pulled her into an embrace. She stiffened initially, then slowly relaxed against him. They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who'd found each other through desperation now facing death together. We're going to survive this, Caleb said into her hair. Both of us. And then we're going to finish planting that garden and see if we can't save this dying ranch. You're delusional. Probably. But I'm your husband, so you're stuck with me. He felt rather than heard her laugh, a small huff of breath against his chest. Worst decision I ever made, answering that advertisement? Same here, placing it. Liar. You needed me. Still do. She pulled back, looked up at him. If we survive tomorrow, and that's a big if, things can't go back to how they were. You understand that? What do you mean? I mean this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is, it's not just a transaction anymore. We're partners now. Real partners. That means honesty, even when it's hard. It means trusting each other. No more secrets. I can live with that. Can you? Because my secrets are ugly, Caleb, and there are more of them than you know. Then we'll deal with them. Together. She studied his face, looking for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded. All right, together. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Rhea showed Caleb some basic tactics, how to move between cover, how to make himself a harder target, how to shoot when your hands were shaking with fear. He showed her the ranch's quirks, the squeaky board on the back porch, the cellar with a second exit most people didn't know about, the barn's loft with a clear view of the approach road. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust, they took positions. Caleb in the house with the Winchester, Rhea in the barn with the Henry, and a clear line of sight on anyone approaching from the east. They didn't have to wait long. Victor Hale arrived exactly at noon, riding at the head of 6 men just as he'd promised. They spread out as they approached, professional and coordinated. Caleb's stomach clenched. These weren't ranch hands or drunks. These were killers. Hale stopped 50 yards from the house, well out of easy rifle range. "Iris," he called, "I assume you've made your decision." From the barn, Ria's voice rang out clear and strong. "I'm not going with you, Victor." "I was afraid you'd say that. Last chance, come voluntarily, or we take you by force." "Try it," Hale sighed, the sound carrying in the still air. "Very well, gentlemen, you know what to do. The woman alive. The man doesn't matter." The 6 men dismounted, spreading out in a practiced pattern. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. No more planning, no more preparation. Just survival or death. One of Hale's men, a lean figure with a rifle, moved toward the barn. Ria's shot rang out, catching him in the shoulder and spinning him to the ground. Not a killing shot, but enough to drop him. All hell broke loose. Bullets tore through the barn walls, through the house windows. Caleb returned fire, trying to remember everything Ria had taught him. Don't panic, breathe, aim, squeeze. He caught one man crossing open ground, dropped him with a shot to the leg. Another dove behind the water trough, pinned down. From the barn, Ria's rifle cracked steadily. Measured shots, each one forcing Hale's men to keep their heads down. But there were too many of them, and they were too skilled. They advanced by inches, using cover, suppressing fire. One made it to the side of the house, out of Caleb's sightline. He heard footsteps on the porch. Caleb spun, brought the Winchester up just as the door crashed open. The man filled the doorway, pistol raised. They fired simultaneously. Caleb felt something burn across his ribs as his shot took the man square in the chest. The man went down. Caleb staggered, pressed his hand to his side. Blood, but not much. A graze, painful, but not fatal. No time to think about it. He moved to another window, saw 2 more men closing on the barn from different angles. Ria couldn't watch both directions at once. He fired, missed, fired again. One man stumbled, caught in the thigh. The other returned fire, bullets splintering the window frame next to Caleb's head. Then he heard Ria scream. Caleb's blood turned to ice at the sound of Ria's scream. He abandoned his position at the window, sprinting toward the back door even as his rational mind screamed that he was leaving himself exposed. The pain in his ribs flared with each step, but he didn't slow down. He burst out the back door just in time to see one of Hale's men dragging Ria from the barn. She fought like a wildcat, elbows, knees, teeth, but the man was twice her size and had her arms pinned. Blood ran from a gash on her forehead. Caleb raised his rifle. The angle was wrong, too much risk of hitting Ria. He started running, closing the distance, aware that he was presenting himself as a perfect target, but not caring. The man saw him coming, tried to shift Ria as a shield, but she drove her heel into his instep. He howled, his grip loosening just enough. Ria twisted free, dropping low as Caleb fired over her head. The shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him around. Ria was on him before he hit the ground, her knife appearing from somewhere. She didn't hesitate, drove the blade up under his ribs with the precision of someone who'd done it before. The man's eyes went wide, then empty. "Behind you!" Ria shouted. Caleb spun. Another of Hale's men had rounded the barn, pistol raised. Time seemed to slow. Caleb knew he couldn't bring the rifle around fast enough, knew the bullet was coming, knew this was how he died. Then Ria was there, shoving him aside. The gunshot cracked through the air. Ria staggered, hand going to her left arm where blood bloomed through her sleeve. Caleb's world narrowed to red rage. He worked the Winchester's lever, fired, levered, fired again. The first shot went wide, but the second caught the shooter's center mass. The man dropped. "Inside!" Caleb gasped, grabbing Ria. "We need to get inside." They ran for the house, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. Somehow they made it to the back door, crashed through, slammed it shut. Caleb dragged the kitchen table across to barricade it. Ria slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Her left arm hung uselessly, blood dripping from her fingers onto the floor. "How bad?" Caleb asked, already tearing at her sleeve. "Clean through, I think. Hurts like hell, but I can move my fingers." She demonstrated, wincing. "Could be worse. Could be better." He grabbed a dish towel, wrapped it tight around the wound. Ria hissed through her teeth but didn't pull away. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Ominous silence settled over the ranch. "How many did we get?" Ria asked. "I count 4 down, maybe 5. That leaves at least 2 plus Hale." 3 on 2. Better odds than we started with. You're shot. So are you. Caleb looked down, surprised to see his shirt soaked with blood from the graze across his ribs. Adrenaline had kept the pain at bay, but now it came roaring back. We're a mess, he said. Yeah, Ria's laugh was shaky. But we're still breathing. A voice called from outside, Victor Hale, still maintaining that cultured calm. Iris, I must say, I'm impressed. You've cost me 4 good men. That's expensive. Ria and Caleb exchanged glances. 4 confirmed then. But you're trapped now, Hale continued. We can wait you out or we can burn you out. Either way, this ends the same. Why prolong the inevitable? Go to hell, Victor, Ria shouted back. Such language. Is that what passes for wit out here in the territories? A pause. Let's try this another way. I'll make you a new offer. Come out now, both of you, and I'll let Mr. Vance live. You have my word. Your word means nothing, Caleb called. You sent men to kill us. I sent men to retrieve what's mine. The killing was regrettable but necessary. Hale's voice moved. He was circling, trying to find a better position. But I'm a reasonable man. I can see you care for each other. That's something I can work with. Ria grabbed Caleb's arm. Don't listen to him. He's lying. I know. Mr. Vance, you seem like a decent fellow. Hard-working, honest. You don't deserve to die for my former employees' poor choices. Hale was closer now, somewhere near the front of the house. Walk away. Leave her to me. I'll even pay you for your trouble. Caleb moved to the front window, careful to stay behind cover. He couldn't see Hale but caught movement behind the water trough, one of the remaining men. Not interested, he said. No? How much is she worth to you, I wonder? $1,000? 2? The offer was insultingly transparent, but Hale pressed on. Think about it. You could rebuild your ranch. Buy new cattle. Hire real help instead of depending on a woman with more enemies than sense. Ria's hand found Caleb's, squeezed hard. Her face was pale from blood loss, but her jaw was set. She's my wife, Caleb said simply. She's not for sale. How very noble, and how very stupid. The pleasantness dropped from Hale's voice. You have 10 minutes to reconsider. After that, we come in. Caleb turned from the window. Can you shoot? Ria flexed her injured arm, winced. Right-handed, yes. Won't be as steady, but I can manage. Good, because we need to change tactics. They'll rush us soon, probably from multiple sides. We can't defend everything. So what do you suggest? We go on offense. Hit them before they're ready. Ria blinked. That's insane. You have a better idea? She didn't. They quickly formed a plan, barely deserving of the name, more like organized desperation. Caleb would create a distraction at the front while Ria circled around through the cellar's back exit. Catch them in a crossfire, or at least force them to split their attention. If this goes wrong, Ria started. It won't. Caleb, if it does, I want you to know... She stopped, struggling with something. I want you to know that this month, being here with you, it's been the closest thing to peace I've had in years. Even with all this. Maybe especially with all this. He should say something meaningful, something that captured the weight of the moment. Instead, what came out was, You're a terrible gardener. Those tomatoes are never going to make it. She laughed, sharp and surprised. Your fence work is sloppy. Your coffee is too strong. Your mare likes me better than you. They were both grinning now, edge of death hysteria bleeding into something that felt almost like joy. Caleb pulled her close, kissed her forehead above the gash, still bleeding sluggishly. Don't get killed, he said. Same to you. They split up. Caleb counted to 30, then threw open the front door and started shooting. He didn't aim for anything specific, just laid down fire to make Hale's remaining men keep their heads down. The Winchester clicked empty. He dropped it, drew his Colt, kept shooting. Return fire shattered what was left of the front windows. Bullets punched through the door frame, through the walls. Caleb dove behind the overturned couch, reloaded with shaking hands. From somewhere outside came the crack of Ria's rifle. A man screamed, pain, not death. More gunfire, different angles. The crossfire was working. Caleb risked a look, saw one of Hale's men stumbling, clutching his leg. The man behind the water trough was trying to get a bead on Ria's position. Caleb aimed carefully, squeezed. The shot went high, but close enough to make the man duck. Then Hale appeared, stepping into the open with his own pistol drawn. He fired twice in quick succession. Caleb heard Rhea cry out. Something primal and terrible rose in Caleb's chest. He vaulted the couch, charged through the door. Hale turned, surprised by the frontal assault. They fired at the same time. Caleb felt something punch his left shoulder, spun him halfway around. His shot went wide. He kept moving forward, closed the distance before Hale could fire again. They collided, went down in a tangle of limbs. Hale was older but fought with vicious efficiency. A knee drove into Caleb's wounded ribs. Stars exploded across his vision. He managed to pin Hale's gun hand, drove his forehead into the other man's nose. Blood sprayed. They rolled, each fighting for position. Hale's free hand found Caleb's throat, squeezed. Caleb's vision started to dim. He scrabbled for his dropped pistol, couldn't reach it. His fingers found dirt, a rock. He swung it awkwardly into Hale's temple. The grip on his throat loosened. Caleb sucked in air, hit Hale again. The older man went limp. Caleb staggered to his feet, retrieved his Colt. His left arm hung useless, blood running down to drip from his fingertips. Every breath sent agony through his ribs. But he was alive. "Rhea," he called. No answer. Terror gave him strength. He stumbled toward where he'd last heard her rifle, found her behind the chicken coop, slumped against the wall. Blood stained her right side, just above the hip. Her rifle lay beside her, one hand still loosely gripping it. "Hey," she said weakly when she saw him. "You look terrible. You're shot." Again, starting to think I'm bad luck. She tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Did we win?" Caleb looked around. Bodies littered the yard, Hale's men all down. Hale himself was unconscious in the dirt. The ranch looked like a war zone. The house was shot to pieces. The barn had a hole in the roof. Blood stained the ground in a dozen places. "Yeah," he said. "We won." "Doesn't feel like it." "No." He knelt beside her, examined the wound. The bullet had gone through, missing anything vital by what looked like inches. "We need to get you inside. Stop this bleeding." "In a minute. Just let me catch my breath." They sat together behind the chicken coop as the afternoon sun beat down. In the distance, smoke rose from something, probably the barn smoldering from a stray shot. Caleb knew he should check on Hale, make sure the man was secure, should tend to their wounds properly, should do any number of urgent things. Instead, he sat with his wife, both of them leaking blood onto the Wyoming dirt, and felt something close to triumph. They'd survived. Eventually, Caleb forced himself to move. He helped Rhea into the house, got her settled on the couch with pressure on her wound. Then, despite every instinct screaming at him to stay with her, he went back outside. Hale was stirring, groaning. Caleb zip-tied his hands with wire from the barn, crude but effective. The man's nose was clearly broken, his face a mask of blood. "You're making a mistake," Hale slurred through split lips. "You can't just—" "I have lawyers, resources. You're a dead man." "Maybe, but you're the one tied up." Caleb checked the bodies of Hale's men. 4 dead, 2 wounded, but alive. The wounded men he secured like Hale, though they were in no shape to cause trouble. The scope of what they'd done started to sink in. 6 men shot, 4 dead. This wasn't a property dispute or a bar fight. This was serious. Federal serious. He went back inside. Rhea had managed to wrap her own wound, though blood was already seeping through the bandage. "We need a doctor," Caleb said. "We need the marshal more. This isn't going away on its own." She was right. Whatever happened next, they needed the law involved before Hale's lawyers showed up and twisted the story. "I'll ride to Copper Falls," Caleb said. "Get Doc Morrison and the marshal." "You're shot. You can barely stand. So are you, and you're worse." They stared at each other, both too stubborn to back down. Finally, Rhea sighed. "We both go. Help each other into the wagon. If we pass out, at least we pass out together." It took them 20 minutes to hitch the horses, a job that should have taken 5. Everything hurt. Caleb's shoulder had gone numb, which he suspected was bad. Rhea kept swaying, catching herself on the wagon for balance. But they managed, climbed onto the seat, Caleb taking the reins in his good hand. Behind them, the ranch smoldered and bled. 3 men tied up and waiting. The ride to Copper Falls blurred. Caleb focused on keeping the horses steady, on not falling off the wagon. Beside him, Rhea pressed her hand to her side and stared straight ahead with grim determination. They made it halfway before Caleb saw riders approaching. His hand went to his gun before he recognized Marcus Webb and Doc Morrison, along with 3 other men from town. "Sweet Jesus," Marcus breathed when they got close enough to see the blood. "What happened?" "Men came for Rhea," Caleb said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "We fought them off. 6 of them. Need the marshal." Doc Morrison was already climbing onto the wagon, examining Rhea's wound. "This needs proper care. We need to get you both back to town now." "The ranch," Rhea said. "There are men there. One of them, Victor Hale. He needs to be arrested." "Marshal's already riding out," Marcus said. "Someone heard the shooting, came into town. Whole place is talking about the battle at the Vance Ranch." Of course they were. Privacy didn't exist in a town this small. The journey back to Copper Falls took forever and no time at all. Caleb's awareness came in fragments. Doc Morrison's hands on his shoulder, gentle but firm. Rhea's voice, giving details about Hale to someone. The familiar buildings of town appearing around them. They ended up in Doc Morrison's office. The small clinic space converted to emergency surgery. Morrison worked on Rhea first. Her wound was worse. The bullet had done damage on its way through. Caleb sat in a chair watching, trying not to think about what would happen if she died after everything they'd survived. "She'll make it," Morrison said, reading his expression. "Lost blood, but the bullet missed anything vital. She's tough." "I know." Morrison turned to Caleb next. The shoulder wound was clean, through and through, missing bone. The rib graze was superficial. Morrison cleaned, stitched, bandaged with efficient competence. "You're both incredibly lucky," the doctor said. "A few inches different on any of these wounds, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Lucky. Caleb wasn't sure that was the right word. While Morrison worked, Marshal Garrett arrived, a weathered man in his 50s who'd been keeping peace in Copper Falls for a decade. He took their statements, writing everything down in a careful hand. "This Victor Hale," Garrett said. "You're saying he's a crime boss from Denver? Came all the way out here for your wife?" "For his employee," Rhea corrected. Her voice was weak but clear. "I worked for him after my husband died. Saw things he didn't want known. When I ran, I became a liability. And he brought 6 men to take you back. Or kill me if I refused." Garrett's expression was skeptical. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Vance." "There are bodies at my ranch that prove it," Caleb said, along with 3 men tied up and waiting, including Hale himself. "My deputies are securing the scene now." Garrett closed his notebook. "I'll need to verify your story, talk to the survivors. But if things are as you say, self-defense seems clear." "And Hale?" "If he's who you claim, there'll be warrants. Federal marshals will want to talk to him." Garrett studied Rhea. "To you as well. If you witnessed federal crimes, they'll need your testimony." Rhea's face went pale. "I told you what I know. That should be enough." "Might be, might not. Depends what they find when they start digging into Mr. Hale's operations." The marshal's expression softened slightly. "But that's a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, you 2 need rest." They were given a room at Sarah Chen's boarding house. The irony wasn't lost on Caleb. Sarah, who'd been so hostile to Rhea a month ago, now fussed over them both like they were family. "I heard what happened," she said, helping Rhea into bed. "Heard you fought off 6 armed men. Heard you saved your husband's life." "He saved mine first," Rhea said. "Well, maybe I was wrong about you." Sarah pulled the blanket up. "Not many women would stand and fight like that. Fewer still would survive." After she left, Caleb sat on the edge of the bed. Every muscle ached. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. But they were alive. "We did it," he said. "Did we?" Rhea's eyes were already closing, exhaustion and medication pulling her under. "We survived today. But Victor has resources. Lawyers. People. This isn't over. Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow. Tonight, we rest." She reached for his hand, held it loosely. "Thank you. For standing with me, for not giving up. Thank you for not leaving. Didn't really have a choice. You did. You chose to stay and fight. Her breathing evened out, sleep taking her. Caleb sat there, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall. The room was quiet, except for the distant sounds of the town. Horses, voices, the normal rhythms of life continuing despite the violence that had shattered his world. He should sleep too, should let his body heal. But his mind kept replaying the fight, seeing the moments where things could have gone differently, where either of them could have died. They'd survived on luck and desperation. Against trained killers, they'd somehow come out alive. But Rhea was right. This wasn't over. Hale might be in custody now, but men like that didn't stay down. And even if he did, there would be questions. Federal investigators poking into Rhea's past, into what she'd done while working for Hale. Caleb had married a stranger to save his ranch. Instead, he'd nearly lost everything, including his life. But looking at Rhea now, bruised and bandaged and finally at peace and sleep, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Couldn't regret any of it. She'd brought danger to his door, but she'd also brought something he'd forgotten he needed, someone to stand beside. Someone who fought when fighting was required, who didn't give up when giving up was easier. Someone who made the failing ranch feel less like a tomb and more like a home worth defending. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in those same shades of amber and rust he'd watched countless times before. But tonight, it felt different. Not like an ending, but like a beginning. They'd survived, together. And whatever came next, they'd face that together too. Caleb finally let himself sleep, still holding his wife's hand, both of them battered and bloody, but alive. The future was uncertain. The dangers weren't past. But for this moment, in this quiet room, they had peace. It was enough. Caleb woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sharp awareness that his entire body felt like it had been trampled by his own cattle. His shoulder screamed protest when he tried to move. Beside him, Rhea still slept, her breathing shallow but steady. The door creaked open. Doc Morrison entered carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like stale bread. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting the tray down. "Like I got shot twice and beat half to death." "That's because you did." Morrison checked Rhea's bandages, his expression satisfied. "She's healing well. Fever broke around dawn. You both got incredibly lucky." "People keep saying that." "Because it's true. I've seen men die from wounds less severe than what you two took." Morrison poured coffee, handed Caleb a cup. "Marshall wants to talk to you both when she wakes. Federal marshals arrived this morning from Cheyenne. They're very interested in Victor Hale." Caleb's stomach clenched. "They taking him?" "Already did, along with the 2 survivors from his crew. The bodies." Morrison paused. "They're being handled. You'll need to answer questions about what happened, but Garrett's satisfied it was self-defense." "And the federal marshals? What do they want with Rhea?" "That's between them and her. But Caleb," Morrison's voice dropped. "Whatever she told you about her past, whatever she did working for Hale, it's going to come out. These men don't play games. They'll want everything she knows." After Morrison left, Caleb sat drinking bitter coffee and watching Rhea sleep. Her face was still bruised from the fight, the gash on her forehead stitched and bandaged. She looked small under the blankets, vulnerable in a way she never allowed when awake. He thought about what Morrison said. Federal marshals meant serious investigation. They'd dig into Rhea's history, expose everything she'd been running from. The woman he'd married to save his ranch would have to face demons she'd spent 2 years fleeing. Rhea's eyes opened. For a moment she looked confused. Then memory returned and her expression hardened. "How long was I out?" she asked. "About 12 hours. How do you feel?" "Like I was shot and dragged behind a horse." She tried to sit up, gasped, fell back. "Maybe worse than that. Federal marshals are here. They took Hale." Her face went pale. "They'll want to question me." "Probably." "Caleb, I need you to understand something. What I did for Victor, it wasn't all collection work. Some of it was worse. If they start digging, they might find things that could put me in prison." "Did you kill anyone who didn't deserve it?" She met his eyes. "I don't know how to answer that. I killed people Victor pointed me at, told myself they must have done something to earn it. But I didn't ask questions, didn't verify, just did what I was told." "Because you were afraid." "Fear's not an excuse. It's just a reason." She turned her head toward the window. "Maybe I should have died with Thomas. Would have been simpler." "Don't say that." Why not? It's true. All I've done is spread the damage. Got you shot, got your ranch torn to pieces, probably destroyed any chance you had at a normal life in this territory. Caleb set down his coffee cup, shifted carefully to face her. You want to know what I think? Not particularly. I think you've spent so long running and fighting that you've forgotten how to just be a person. You judge yourself harder than anyone else ever could. He reached for her hand, held it despite her attempt to pull away. I married you because I was desperate. That's true. But somewhere along the way, you became more than just help I hired. You became someone worth fighting for. I'm not worth... Don't tell me what you're worth. I'll decide that for myself. His voice came out rougher than intended. You saved a dying calf because you couldn't stand to give up on something. You planted a garden in dirt I'd written off as useless. You stood beside me when 6 armed men came to kill us, and you didn't run even though running would have been smarter. Ria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You don't understand what they'll ask. What they'll make me confess. Then we'll deal with it. Together, just like we dealt with Hale. This is different. You can't shoot your way out of a federal investigation. No. But you can tell the truth and hope it's enough. A knock interrupted them. Marshal Garrett entered, followed by 2 men in suits who carried themselves with the authority of federal law. Both had hard eyes that assessed everything in seconds. Mrs. Vance, the taller one said, I'm Marshal James Tucker. This is Marshal William Cross. We need to ask you some questions about Victor Hale and your time working for his organization. Ria sat up despite the pain, met their gazes without flinching. I'll tell you what I know. They questioned her for 2 hours. Caleb stayed, holding her hand while she described her marriage to Thomas Caldwell, his gambling debts, his work for Hale. She detailed the night Thomas was killed, what she'd witnessed, the choice Hale had given her. Then came the harder part, what she'd done in those 3 months working for Hale, the collections, the intimidation, the violence. Her voice stayed level, factual, but Caleb felt her hand trembling in his. And the man you killed in the alley, Tucker said, consulting his notes. The one you mentioned, you're certain he intended to assault you? He had my dress torn and his hands around my throat when I put the knife in him. So, yes, I'm certain. Self-defense, then. I'd call it that. Tucker exchanged glances with Cross. Mrs. Vance, here's the situation. Victor Hale is wanted on multiple federal charges, racketeering, murder for hire, corruption of public officials. Your testimony could help build a case that puts him away for life, but you're also admitting to crimes yourself. I know. Assault, extortion, possibly accessory to murder, depending on what we uncover. That's serious time. Ria's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. What are you offering? Immunity. Full immunity for any crimes committed while under duress working for Hale, in exchange for your complete cooperation and testimony. And if I refuse, then we investigate everything, and whatever we find, you'll answer for. Caleb felt his heart hammering. This was the moment, Ria's chance to finally be free of her past, or to face consequences for actions she'd spent 2 years running from. I'll cooperate, Ria said quietly. I'll testify. Tell you everything I know. But I need one condition. We're not really in a negotiating position here, Mrs. Vance. My husband had nothing to do with any of this. He married me not knowing who I was or what I'd done. When Hale came, Caleb tried to protect me because that's who he is. He doesn't deserve to be dragged into my mess. Tucker's expression softened slightly. Mr. Vance defended his property and his wife against armed attackers. There's no question of charges against him. He's not part of this. Relief flooded through Caleb, but Ria wasn't finished. And when this is over, when the trial's done and Hale's convicted, I want to walk away, start fresh. No more looking over my shoulder, no more running. I want a life. If you testify and Hale's convicted, you'll have earned that. Tucker stood. We'll need you to come to Cheyenne when you're healed. Give a full deposition. After that, you'll likely need to appear at trial. How long? Months, probably. Hale's lawyers will drag this out as long as possible. After the marshals left, Ria slumped back against the pillows. She looked exhausted, wrung out. You all right? Caleb asked. I don't know. Ask me when this is really over. She turned to him. You understand what this means? Months of depositions and trials, my face in newspapers, everyone knowing what I did. I understand. The town will crucify me. Sarah Chen will have a field day. Let them talk. We survived worse than gossip. Have we? Her voice was small. Sometimes I think the bullet would have been easier than this. Caleb wanted to argue, to offer reassurance, but he'd learned enough about Rhea to know she didn't want platitudes. She wanted honesty. Maybe it would have been, he said. Dying's quick, living's harder, but I'm glad you're choosing to live. Even knowing what you know now, what I did. Yeah, even knowing. They returned to the ranch 3 days later, both still moving carefully, still healing. What greeted them was worse than Caleb expected. The house was riddled with bullet holes, windows shattered, the front door hanging crooked on broken hinges. The barn had a section of roof missing. Blood stained the ground in dark patches that hadn't washed away. Rhea stood in the yard, taking it all in. We really destroyed this place. We defended it. Same result, though. She walked slowly toward the house, favoring her wounded side. Going to take months to repair all this. Good thing we have months while you're dealing with the marshals. Inside was no better. Furniture was overturned and splintered. The kitchen table they'd used as a barricade was split down the middle. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls, letting in fingers of daylight. But Rhea went straight to the window overlooking her garden. Caleb followed, looked over her shoulder. Somehow, impossibly, the garden had survived. The vegetables she'd planted were still growing, untouched by the violence that had destroyed everything around them. Would you look at that? She said softly. The tomatoes made it. Something about the wonder in her voice broke through Caleb's exhaustion. He started laughing, painful given his ribs, but unable to stop. Rhea joined him, both of them leaning against each other and laughing at the absurdity of surviving a gunfight only to celebrate intact tomatoes. The laughter faded into comfortable silence. They stood together, looking out at the garden and the land beyond. I don't know how to do this, Rhea said eventually. How to just live, without running or hiding or preparing for the next threat. Neither do I. Lost that skill somewhere along the way. So we figure it out together? Seems like our only option. Over the following weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were spent repairing damage, Caleb working one-handed to patch the roof, while Rhea, despite Doc Morrison's protests, helped however she could. Afternoons brought visitors, marshals with more questions, lawyers taking depositions, occasionally townspeople who'd heard about the battle and wanted to see the damage for themselves. The town's attitude toward Rhea had shifted, not to acceptance exactly, but to wary respect. The woman in black who'd stepped off the train was now the woman who'd fought 6 armed men and survived. Sarah Chen actually apologized, though it came wrapped in enough qualifications to barely count. I may have judged you too harshly, Sarah said, bringing over a basket of food. A woman who fights for her home, that's admirable. I was fighting for my life, Rhea corrected. Home was secondary. Still, you stayed and fought. That counts for something. After Sarah left, Caleb found Rhea in the garden, pulling weeds with more aggression than necessary. You could have been gracious, he said. I could have been a lot of things. Gracious isn't in my nature. I've noticed. She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. They only respect me now because I was willing to kill. That's not respect, it's fear with better manners. Does it matter? Shouldn't it? Caleb sat down beside her, careful of his still healing shoulder. Maybe, but you can't control what people think. You can only control what you do. Philosophy from a rancher. Didn't know that came with the territory. It's a hidden talent. She smiled slightly, returned to pulling weeds. They worked in companionable silence until the sun dropped toward the horizon. 2 months after the fight, Rhea had to travel to Cheyenne for the first deposition. Caleb went with her despite her protest that he should stay and work the ranch. The ranch survived this long, half-maintained, he said. It'll survive another week. Cheyenne was bigger than anything in Copper Falls. Real buildings, paved streets, the territorial capitol building imposing against the sky. Rhea's deposition took 3 days, lawyers from both sides questioning her about every detail of her time working for Hale. Caleb waited outside, watching other people's lives continue around him. Businessmen in suits, women in fine dresses, children playing in the street. Normal lives, untouched by the violence that had defined his last few months. When Rhea emerged on the third day, she looked hollowed out. They walked back to the hotel in silence. Only when they were alone in their room did she finally speak. They made me describe every person I hurt, every threat I delivered, every time I stood by while someone was beaten, or worse. Her voice was flat, emotionless. The lawyers tried to make me into a victim, said I was coerced, that I had no choice. But the truth is, I did have choices. I just made the wrong ones. You survived. That was the right choice. Was it? Thomas is dead. Those people I hurt, they carry that forever. And for what? So I could end up here dragging you into my disaster? Caleb pulled her into his arms, felt her resist, then slowly give in. You're not a disaster. You're just a person who did what she had to do. That's not enough. Maybe not, but it's what we have. They stayed in Cheyenne for another week while Rhea met with prosecutors, reviewed evidence, prepared for the eventual trial. Caleb explored the city, bought supplies they couldn't get in Copper Falls, tried to imagine what life might be like if they chose to leave the ranch and start fresh somewhere new. But every time he thought about it, he came back to the same conclusion. The ranch was home. Broken and battered, yes, but home nonetheless. On their last night in Cheyenne, they had dinner in a restaurant fancier than anything Caleb had ever seen. Rhea wore a dress she'd bought with money the marshals had provided, dark green instead of her usual black, fitted in a way that made her look less like a gunfighter and more like the woman she might have been in a different life. You clean up nice, Caleb said. Don't get used to it. This dress isn't practical for ranch work. Shame. I like seeing you as something other than my hired help. Is that what I still am? Hired help? The question caught him off guard. They'd been living as husband and wife for months, had fought and nearly died together, had shared a bed on this trip, though neither had attempted anything beyond simple proximity. But they'd never actually discussed what they were to each other. I don't know what you are, Caleb admitted. We got married out of desperation, but somewhere along the way it stopped feeling like a transaction. What does it feel like now? Like a partnership. Like having someone who sees the worst of you and stays anyway. He met her eyes. What does it feel like to you? Rhea was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. Like having a place to belong. Like not being alone anymore. She paused. Like being married, I suppose. Actually married, not just legally bound. Is that what you want? I don't know. Is it what you want? They stared at each other across the fancy restaurant table, both too damaged and too honest to pretend at romance they didn't feel. But there was something there, respect, trust, maybe the foundation of something deeper if they gave it time to grow. I want you to stay, Caleb said finally, not because I need help with the ranch, though I do, but because I like having you there. I like who I am when you're around. Who are you? Someone who tries, someone who doesn't give up. He reached across the table, took her hand. Someone who believes things can be fixed if you work hard enough. Rhea's fingers curled around his. I can't promise to be easy to live with. I'm difficult and stubborn, and I carry more baggage than any sane person would tolerate. I noticed. Lucky for you, I'm not particularly sane. Lucky for both of us. They returned to Copper Falls the next day, to the ranch that was slowly being rebuilt. The house had new windows now. The roof was patched, the bullet holes filled and sanded, though the scars still showed if you knew where to look. Marcus Webb had kept an eye on the place while they were gone, had even done some repair work without being asked. The town, it seemed, had decided the Vances were worth supporting after all. People feel guilty, Marcus explained, about how they treated Rhea at first, fighting off Hale's men. That bought you both a lot of goodwill. We didn't fight them for goodwill, Caleb said. I know, but you got it anyway. The trial happened in early autumn, 6 months after the gunfight. Rhea testified for 3 days, describing in clinical detail everything she'd witnessed while working for Victor Hale. The defense attorneys tried to discredit her, called her a criminal and a liar. But she never wavered, never backed down. Caleb sat in the courtroom gallery, watching his wife face down lawyers and a packed room of spectators. She looked small in the witness box, but her voice carried clear and strong. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Rhea showed no emotion, just a slight relaxation in her shoulders, like a weight had finally lifted. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Tucker found them. "You did good in there, Mrs. Vance. Hale's going to prison for the rest of his life, largely because of your testimony." "And my immunity?" Rhea asked. "Upheld. As far as the federal government is concerned, you're clear." He handed her an envelope. "There's also this. Hale had assets, money, property. Some of it's being used to compensate his victims. But there was a collection you made that was never delivered. $800. Since you're the one who took it, we're returning it to you." Rhea stared at the envelope. "The money I stole. The money you took from a criminal enterprise and are now legally entitled to as compensation for your cooperation." Tucker smiled slightly. "Use it well." They used it to buy cattle. 20 head to start, young stock that would grow into a proper herd. Marcus Webb helped them find good animals at fair prices. Other ranchers, hearing about what happened, offered advice and assistance. The garden Rhea had planted yielded more than either of them expected. Tomatoes, beans, squash, enough to eat and some to sell in town. She expanded it the following spring, planting twice as much area. "You were wrong about those tomatoes," she told Caleb one evening, both of them sitting on the repaired porch watching the sun set. "I was wrong about a lot of things." "Like what?" "Like thinking I could run this ranch alone. Like believing a mail-order marriage was a purely practical arrangement. Like assuming you'd never fit in here." "I still don't fit in. Half the town's afraid of me. But the other half respects you. That's progress." Rhea leaned against his shoulder, something she'd started doing more often, small gestures of affection that came easier now. "Do you ever regret it? Placing that advertisement?" "Every day." She pulled back, hurt flashing across her face. Caleb caught her hand. "I regret it because it almost got us both killed. Because it brought violence to my door and nearly destroyed everything." He squeezed her hand. "But I don't regret you. I'd do it again, knowing how it turned out." "Even the getting shot part?" "Maybe not that part. But the rest, yes." A year after Rhea stepped off that train, they held a proper wedding. Nothing fancy, just Reverend Matthews and a handful of people from town in the small church with its cracked bell. But this time, when they said their vows, they meant them. Caleb looked at his wife, no longer a stranger, no longer just convenient help, and saw someone who'd chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. Someone who'd fought beside him, bled with him, rebuilt their broken home with stubborn determination. "I do," he said, and meant it completely. "I do," Rhea echoed, tears in her eyes but smiling. They kissed, brief and awkward, both of them too self-conscious for grand gestures. But it was real, that was what mattered. The ranch never became wealthy. The herd grew slowly, enough to survive on, but never enough for luxury. The house always showed scars from the gunfight, patches in the walls that didn't quite match, a replaced door that hung slightly different than the original. But it was theirs, built not on desperation or convenience, but on choice, on the decision to stand together when running was easier, on trust earned through hardship and violence and the slow work of healing. Some nights, Caleb would wake to find Rhea standing at the window, looking out over the dark land. Old habits died hard. She still scanned for threats, still kept her gun close, still carried the weight of everything she'd done and survived. But in the morning, she'd be in the garden, or the barn, or the kitchen, working with the same fierce determination she'd shown from the beginning, building the life she'd never thought she'd have. "Do you think we made it?" she asked one evening, both of them exhausted from a day of work. "Do you think we actually succeeded?" Caleb looked around, at the house they'd rebuilt, at the cattle grazing in the distance, at the garden yielding its harvest, at the woman beside him who'd arrived with nothing but a gun and a past she couldn't escape. "Yeah," he said. "I think we made it." It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was harder, more complicated, scarred by violence and marked by choices they both regretted. But it was real. It was honest. It was theirs. And in the end, that was enough. They'd both learned that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding something worth living for, about choosing to rebuild instead of giving up, about facing your past and your failures and deciding that tomorrow could be better than today. The ranch would never be grand. They would never be wealthy. The town would always remember the day 6 men came to kill them and the violence that followed. but they had each other. They had land under their feet and work in their hands and the possibility of tomorrow. They had a partnership forged in desperation, but tempered into something stronger. They had home. And sometimes when everything else was stripped away, that was all anyone really needed, a place to belong, someone to stand beside, and the stubborn refusal to give up on either. The sun set over the Wyoming territory, painting the grasslands in those familiar shades of amber and rust. Caleb and Rhea sat together on their porch, watching the light fade, neither needing to fill the silence with words. They'd survived. They'd rebuilt. They'd found something neither expected when that train arrived in Copper Falls carrying a stranger in black. They'd found each other, and that made every hardship, every scar, every difficult choice worth it. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of the endless labor that defined ranch life. But they'd face it together, two broken people who'd learned that sometimes the best things in life came not from careful planning, but from desperate choices, and the courage to stand when running made more sense. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years for both of them, it was also full of possibility. And that was more than enough.